I've always had a deep affection for my grandparents, a connection that stretches back to my early childhood. With my parents often away on work trips, it was my grandma and grandpa who provided me with the comfort and security I needed. My name is Hilda, and at 31, I'm just about to become a mother, eagerly awaiting the arrival of my first child. As I enter the final stretch of my pregnancy, I feel an overwhelming sense of excitement mixed with a growing concern about my husband, Owen, who recently turned 32. I've noticed a subtle change in him lately, a shift that seems to coincide with the rise of what experts call digital caregiving. The turning point came during a visit to my grandparents' house, when Owen was attempting to set up their Wi-Fi. Though my grandparents didn't really need Wi-Fi, we visited them from time to time. However, Owen's frustration was palpable when he couldn't access his favorite paid movie streaming site. He muttered complaints the whole time, even though my grandparents had paid for the installation just to accommodate him. His irritation seemed to have no limits, and he criticized everything about the process. My grandmother tried to correct him when he mispronounced things, pointing out it was Google, not goggles, and Chrome, not columns, but her corrections only earned a sharp click of his tongue. While I sympathized with his annoyance, it left me with an unsettling feeling I couldn't quite explain. Eventually, the installation was finished, but the atmosphere had shifted. It felt much worse than dealing with the difficulties of physical caregiving. It was like a new, more insidious type of caregiving, one that had been imposed by the digital world. I tried to reason with Owen, suggesting there were computer classes for the elderly that he could take to better understand these things. I even offered to hire someone to assist if necessary, but he waved off my concerns with a sarcastic comment about how tired he was and quickly left to go surfing. This wasn't the man I had married. He had been patient and kind, but now his irritability was seeping into our home. I started to feel more and more neglected and powerless. I began visiting my grandparents more often, where I unintentionally vented my frustrations. They, wise with age, offered insights that struck a chord with me. Grandma, in her gentle way, suggested, "Maybe your husband feels like the baby is pulling you away from him." The wisdom my grandparents offered was priceless, and their words often brought clarity to my life. One evening, as I prepared to leave after a visit, Grandma, aware of how hard it was to manage housework while pregnant, handed me a dish of homemade mac and cheese, a simple yet thoughtful gesture. When I served the same dish at home, Owen's complaints came fast and furious. Ignoring his grumbling, I softly rubbed my swollen belly, now frequently kicked by our baby and aching from back pain. Grandma had made the meal with my condition in mind, but the issue ran deeper. Owen's dissatisfaction was evident, particularly when he questioned my frequent visits to my grandparents and the mac and cheese I brought home. I believed the dish was a small way of showing my love for him, but much like the prenatal depression that affects some expectant mothers, Grandma suggested that something might be troubling Owen as well. Owen scoffed at the idea of eating the mac and cheese, comparing it to food from the 80s before announcing his plan to go surfing. He rejected the idea of eating the meal, convinced that some modern pasta would be far superior. With a heavy sigh, I sat alone, wondering if the arrival of our child might shift his perspective. As Grandma often said, the arrival of a newborn could change everything. I clung to a faint but hopeful belief that our baby could lift the sadness that had clouded us. Labor was excruciating, 7 hours of intense pain, followed by another 3 in the delivery room. It was a painful introduction to motherhood, yet when I saw our baby's face, all the pain seemed worth it. Despite being so tiny, the baby looked like a little person, complete with tiny fingers. I thought, perhaps, that this beautiful new life would melt away both my lingering sadness and Owen's. Unfortunately, Owen never came to the hospital during my stay, nor did he make any attempt to meet our newborn. When I finally returned home, I was met with his cold indifference. His first words, filled with doubt, were, "Is this really my child? You've been going to your grandparents so much lately, and now I'm supposed to believe this?" As I stood on the doorstep holding our baby, he coldly demanded, "Give me some of your hair. I need a DNA test to be sure." My heart pounded in disbelief. Where was this coming from? After everything I had gone through in childbirth, was it fair for him to accuse me like this? Anger surged within me, stronger than anything I had ever felt before. Was he really accusing me of infidelity? What hurt most was his lack of joy for the precious new life we had brought into the world. The next day, My patience worn thin, I confided in my grandparents, who had come to check on the baby. My grandfather, trying to offer some advice from a man's perspective, said, "If you haven't done anything wrong, why not take the DNA test? If you're innocent, you should stand tall. Sometimes, men just need proof to believe. If it clears the air, ask him to make it up to you with something nice, like a cake." His words provided some comfort, and I agreed to submit my hair for the DNA test. I hadn't done anything wrong, and if this resolved the issue, I would accept it. A week later, Owen slammed a paper down in front of me, his face victorious. "The results are here. It's not my child," he said, pointing to the paper that showed no genetic match. "What does this mean?" he demanded. "This is proof you've been unfaithful," he added, his voice filled with accusation. I was in complete shock, unable to recall any of the events that led me here. Clutching the damning evidence, I went to my grandparents' house, where their warm embrace allowed me to finally let the tears flow. After a brief silence, my grandfather softly spoke. "Hilda, you used to come to us when things were tough, didn't you? Don't worry, I'll handle this." His worn hand gently patted my shoulder before brushing through my hair. The baby's fragile fontanelle, still soft, felt delicate under my touch. Since childhood, my grandfather's reassurance of "it's okay" had always been a source of comfort. And now, once more, it brought me peace. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." A few days later, my grandfather took action. He called Owen, and we were all invited to their house for a crucial meeting, one that would inevitably lead to a divorce. Owen arrived, his arrogance clear as he looked at me with disdain, placing the DNA test results he had shown me earlier on the table. My parents were aware of the meeting, but it was just the four of us, my grandparents, Owen, and me, gathered as per my grandfather's request. "Leave it to me for now," my grandfather had said. As we sat in the living room, my grandfather initiated the conversation, handing out copies of the DNA test results, undeniable proof that Owen and the baby were not related. Everyone scrutinized the document as my grandfather proudly stated, "This is from Adam's clinic. It's clear from the report." Owen, clearly confused, asked about the appraisal. "What appraisal?" he asked, his confusion followed by a nervous laugh. My grandfather placed a similar-looking document on the table next to the appraisal Owen had prepared. "This is the real report from Adam's hospital, with the DNA results," my grandfather explained. "I had the test done to check the relationship between Hilda's mother and her biological mother." I blinked in confusion, struggling to understand. "Why?" I asked, unable to make sense of it all. "Look closely, Hilda," my grandfather said, smiling. "Compare this DNA report with the one Owen brought. The formats, the design, completely different." Owen started sweating as my grandfather continued. He explained how, after being offended by Owen's suggestion that I attend computer classes for seniors, he had, indeed, attended one. There, he met a doctor from Adam's hospital, whose connections led to this revelation. "When I saw the appraisal report that Hilda brought," my grandfather said, "I wondered why it was done at Adam's hospital instead of the maternity clinic where Hilda gave birth." He paused and added, "Truth really is stranger than fiction." By now, my grandfather's disbelief was clear. When I asked the doctor at Adam's hospital, he continued, he confirmed Hilda hadn't taken any tests there. After further inquiry, the doctor suggested that showing you our official report would expose the lie. Owen began to shake. "This is forged," he yelled. The furious doctor at Adam's hospital had warned, "You'll face serious consequences for this." "I'm sorry," Owen eventually admitted, tears in his eyes. "It was foolish. I never thought I'd get caught." "What do you mean never thought?" my grandfather scolded, his voice sharp. "That makes it even worse. I won't forgive you. I'll make sure this story is known until the day I die." Here's how I uncovered the truth. My grandfather, taking on the role of both detective and investigator, decided to use his newfound computer skills. With swift movements, he logged into the computer and performed a search. "I did an image search for DNA test certificates," he said, emphasizing the words, "Google Chrome," as we shared some light-hearted moments with my grandparents. The first image that appeared on the screen was identical to the document Owen had first shown me. Owen, now sobbing, was handed a pile of papers by my grandfather. Naturally, We want to know why you forged these documents, my grandfather said sternly. I hacked into your computer. Owen looked up in astonishment. You hacked into my computer? He asked, shocked. Yes, my grandfather said with a grin. I broke into your computer, the one in your room. How did you know the password? Owen stuttered. It's 4646 or 4633, my grandfather replied. I learned it from a retired cop I met in a computer class. The locals around here usually use those numbers for their pins. Owen's eyes widened. So that's how you got in? Exactly, I confirmed. I tried it on a hunch. And it worked. But cracking the password was just the start. You know when you check the timeline on Google Maps? It shows all your past activity? Owen's face paled as sweat dripped onto the table, smudging the ink on the fake DNA report. I kept digging, my grandfather continued, and found something surprising. I didn't learn this in class, but I had to do it for my granddaughter's sake. I checked the dates when Hilda came to vent and when you went surfing. All the places you visited were shady motels. Here's the evidence, Grandpa said, slamming a pile of papers onto the table. Is that all? Owen muttered, still in denial. No, there's more, Grandpa said, unperturbed. I also borrowed your computer data. He showed us messages on the screen, revealing Owen's affair with a woman named Mollier. Messages like, Hotel Lagoon was nice and I really want us to be a real couple soon. Owen couldn't speak anymore. It was you who suggested the computer class, wasn't it? Grandpa said, delivering the final blow. How could you neglect your pregnant wife at such a crucial time? You framed Hilda for infidelity, hurt her, and used your own child to hide your affair. You've sunk to a new low. You don't deserve to be a father. You deserve punishment. Owen bowed his head in shame as Grandpa added, I've made copies of the forged DNA test report. You'll face the consequences for this. I decided to divorce Owen right after the birth, and I received a generous settlement for his infidelity and, yes, even from his mistress. I made sure he paid child support and a lump sum, giving me some financial security. I'm even thinking about finding daycare for my child soon. As they say, when the money's gone, so is the relationship, and that's exactly what happened with Owen and his mistress. I received desperate emails from Owen saying, I'm broke and she left me, please take me back, but I blocked him immediately. More importantly, he's being sued by Adam's clinic for forging documents. There's no chance I'll ever reconcile with him. Meanwhile, my grandparents have showered my child with love. They recently laughed at the sound of the bell as they tapped a stuffed roly-poly toy. She's growing fast. She looks just like Grandma, doesn't she? She'll be a beauty, Grandpa chuckled. No way. She'll be even more beautiful than me, Grandma laughed. Let's take pictures and make a photo movie. A baby's face changes every day, Grandpa said, happily heading to his computer. Thank you, Grandpa, Grandma, I love you both so much. Thank you for watching until the end. If you felt connected to the story, please leave a positive rating and comment.